In this session of the Purple Coffee Podcast, I speak to Pamela Slim about scaling every single one of your ideas. Hello there and welcome to session 23 of the Purple Coffee Podcast, inspiring stories from creative entrepreneurs. I am your host, Turndog, and on this occasion, oh my, I'm so excited to share my interview and chat with Pamela Slim, one of the web's biggest and brightest, and when it comes to authorship, she is up there with the big boys and girls. As you may know, this is in aid of my book, The Successful Mistake, a tale of entrepreneurs' great faux pas and how they turned it around. And when I spoke to Pamela, I was really excited to have someone who's been there and done it and is at the top of her game share some of her issues from the beginning. And she did not disappoint. I'm going to keep my words now brief because I'm sure you're interested in what she has to say rather than myself. But it all surrounds the idea of scaling your business and your ideas. When she started out, she put too much emphasis on one-on-one relationships like consultancy and coaching calls and whatnot. And when she came up with a new idea, it was always based on how she could affect people on a one-on-one basis, which is absolutely wonderful and it makes for great quality service. But it's so difficult to scale. And whether you are a service-based individual or a product one or somewhere in between, you always have to think, how will I be able to scale my business? How will I be able to scale my ideas? It may work for 10 people, but what if I get 1,000 customers come my way? You may be able to do and work with 10 employees, but what if you get to a point where you have to employ 100? It's all about scaling, and it's always about what you can do both now and in the future. And this is exactly what Pam speaks of, and man, it's some great advice. And she still puts all the emphasis on quality and making sure she defines her ideas around what she can offer and make sure that she's ticking the standard boxes, but she does so in a way where she can grow and touch as many people as possible, which I guess is what it's all about. We don't want to just connect with one or two people, we want everybody to value from what we have to offer. So I'm going to stop chatting and get straight to this wonderful and inspiring interview with Pamela Slim. But you may not know who Pamela is, and if that's the case, I have you covered because I've written a little story about her in a way only I can, and it's on my iPhone and I'm going to read it to you now. So let's do that. Claustrophobia is a big deal and it's something that affects millions of people. Now, Pamela Slim isn't a doctor or a scientist with a cure for this pain-enduring agony. Oh no. Pam offers something far more wonderful, for she's the woman behind Escape Cubicle Nation. Cubicles are small and tight and house you in like some chicken or hen. I mean, we're not here to lay eggs, so why on earth do companies lock us up in these tiny, tight spaces? Through a wonderful site, inspiring books and presentations, coaching courses and more, Pam helps people like you and me escape the prison-like 4x4 walls and embrace a life of freedom. All hail Pam, and welcome to her world. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me. I'm delighted to be joined by Pamela Slim, who's an author, an entrepreneur, speaker, business consultant, and also the lead lady from Escape from Cubicle Nation, a website I'm sure you know and have more than likely read and come across in your time. But I'm not going to talk about Pamela's story because she's far more qualified than me. So Pamela, first of all, thank you so much for joining me and being part of The Successful Mistake. A true honor.
My pleasure. I'm delighted to be here.
Excellent. And please just start things off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do, and the full ins and outs.
Yeah. So, as you said, I'm an author and a speaker, and a business strategist, and I've been in business for about 18 years. So, coming up in August will be about 18 years, and I'm actually at a bit of a transition right now in terms of what I'm doing because I started out my entrepreneurial career as a consultant to corporations, and I did that for about 9 or 10 years with great joy and interest, and it was really fascinating being inside companies and helping them be great places to work. Then I met a subset of people who were really interested in starting a business, which is what got my wheels turning about starting Escape from Cubicle Nation, which I did in 2005, and worked with many hundreds of people over 8 years, having so much fun in early stage startup. And that's when I wrote my first book, Escape from Cubicle Nation. And then recently, at the end of December, I published my second book, which is called Body of Work, that really kind of takes the whole set of experience that I've had throughout my professional career and looks at what's the lens about the new world of work, what kind of skills do we need to be highly flexible in a world that's not so clearly defined. I don't think we have so much more just people in corporate or entrepreneurs or people in the not-for-profit sector. We have many people by choice or by force who are going to be moving among and between those different work modes. So, I'm driven by excitement and interest in the world of work. I'm a creator by nature. I love to help create things. I think that's part of what really drove me to spend so much time with an early stage startup and the work that I did with Escape from Cubicle Nation. But now I'm kind of at a fun place as well where I'm starting to work on some new and different projects. A big project with Susan Cain, who's the author of Quiet, about the power of introverts and what we call the quiet revolution, and helping people realize that the extrovert ideal is certainly not reality. Introverts have wonderful natural strengths that we want to bring out. So there's just kind of a lot of cool, interesting projects that are going on for me right now.
Fantastic, and it aligns with a book I'm reading at the minute. I'm reading Jamal Touch's Choose Yourself, and just that whole idea that those defined roles are starting to disappear. More people are freelancing or consulting, or however I suppose you want to sort of define it. But you're kind of in a job but not, and you work for yourself but kind of work for someone else. It's a very undefined role at the minute, and it seems to be going more and more that way as time goes on.
It is true. I think the one thing that we see, I've seen instability in the world of work for decades, and that's part of what makes it interesting, right? Is that markets change and organization leadership changes. But now it is something that is undeniable. I felt like when we had the economic crash in 2007, 2008, it felt to me like it was like an earthquake that the entire world felt at the same time. I don't know about you. I mean, I've been through a number of, of economic downturns. I was in Silicon Valley in the late 90s and I saw a huge impact there. But that seemed to still be kind of centered a lot around that tech sector, even though it certainly affected other people. This one felt like just a massive wake up call for everybody where we realized that this is not the same world that we've been in. And it's, on one hand, it can be disheartening and terrifying to think that like we just don't have the stability. Who knows what the next political crisis can be, or economic crisis, or different, amazing workforces in different countries around the world that are growing and surging and all these interesting things. But that's the scary side of it. But what I see in the opportunity side is we feel pain when we wish for the old way that things were when we live in today's reality versus if we prepare ourselves with the kinds of skills we need to survive in today's reality, that's where we can begin to create our own internal stability, right? You know that if your business doesn't work out, you have connections and contacts within the world of work where you could get a job. You know how to do an interview, you know how to find, a great organization. And that's where you don't have to be so panicked about things, changing, because that's just going to be the way that it is. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I don't think I will be
No,
moving forward.
I don't think you will. It's just changed. I mean, I remember the financial crisis. I was at business school and I was like, well, that's my chance of a job gone. The future is just changing while I was there. I was like, oh my gosh. But it's changed completely, and the whole sort of definition of what a job was sort of in the early 2000s compared to what it is now, at least on a larger scale, is just, completely different. Well, I must say I'm excited to hear your insight. This interview is in aid of my book, The Successful Mistake, which is all about an entrepreneur's great mistake and how they've turned it around. You've been in a few different industries, you've kind of come up and down, you've lived through a few of those peaks and troughs. So I'm sure you have a few tales to share. So I'm going to just pass it over to you, really, and please share the story about that big mistake and the journey it led you on, and yeah, how it's brought you to here right now.
Yeah, I mean, choosing one, boy.
I know.
There are many as I go along. I was thinking about this in preparation for our conversation, and I think the one that I'm really feeling it is the most relevant right now, is in just looking at what I find has been a common scenario for me in my professional career of, on one hand, um, being a person of the people, right? Like, I actually don't have a vision to create many barriers between myself and others so that I could be sitting on the beach or in a castle somewhere where I won't have to touch the people and money just pours into my bank account. Like that.
Yeah.
That has never really been my desire. I'm a community builder by nature, and I love to be connecting with people and serving people. What I found in the business that I've had within the 8 years that I did Escape from Cubicle Nation is that could become a limiting factor. Like, a couple things that I notice in patterns of mistakes is, in order to create a viable, healthy business model to take care of myself and my family, when you're working more intensively with real people on their businesses, you have to work with a lot more, right? So there would be weeks where I'd look at my calendar and I would just have coaching call after coaching call, and then interview with this person, and then projects that I was doing for small companies, and just having so much of my effort and energy that was put like full bore into individuals or into a creative project where there wasn't a lot of leverage. And on one hand, that fed into great joy because I was able to build relationships with people who I truly care about in a very different way than if they had just read my book, right? Or taken some kind of an online class. But what I noticed is more of a systemic pattern and issue that I'm really looking at in a different way as I'm in this next stage of my business is in taking the appropriate, really taking an appropriate assessment and being very honest with myself about what is a part that I want to make sure from a values and organizational design perspective that I keep, which is being connected with people, not having, multiple layers, being accessible when I'm in, for example, a public setting where I'm giving a talk and I'm talking to people or at a conference or event, but realizing that I need to set some parameters. I need to be creating products and services where I can reach one to many.
Yeah.
And that's, and so, as we look at diagnosing that mistake, right, there can be, I mean, part of the problem is I'm such a dang optimist and I'm a life coach that I even have a hard time saying, like, that was a mistake. Because then I can always say, but no, it wasn't. I mean, there were great things that happened as a result of that. But I think that from a pattern perspective, I can remember a couple of times where I was serving a lot of clients at the same time whom I really cared about and would be trying to keep all these businesses in my head. I'd be on the call and I'd be, delving into their business idea. But I had a client who I was working with, and she said, we worked for a couple sessions together. And then she said, you know what, I feel like I need you to be more connected to my business, to know what's going on, to kind of track more what it is that I'm working on, not so much just the times that we're working together in an individual setting, but also just to kind of be more aware. And it was a very amicable, kind of separation that we had, but it really made me stop and think at that moment, like, what am I doing? How can I make sure that that kind of service that I'm providing to people is going to be the kind of service that I want to provide, right? That I have the time and attention. It's hard to carry 50 people's businesses in my head at a single time, right? And some of that is where there's not the intention that as a coach, I have to be necessarily, following somebody along as I would if I was really being a consultant to the business, right? Where I was really tracking everything that was going on. But it was just, one of those moments that's uncomfortable and where, I want to do the right thing. I want to be able to serve everybody in a good way. But it was just kind of a good wake up call of thinking of, that story that you're telling yourself that I was telling myself about I want to be connected with individuals. I don't want to be removing myself from people was actually ending up affecting the quality of the service that I was delivering to people that I cared about. And that was that was like one of those emotional experiences, I remember, and I told her, I mean, we've remained friends, and I think so highly of her, and I hope she thinks highly of me as well. But I told her that was really a defining moment for me. That was something to remember that I've thought about as I'm advising other clients and as I've made decisions about my business model moving forward.
And I think this is such an important point because you start a business and everything's so manageable. Email is, your client list, everything's quite small. So you're able to put a lot of time into customer service and really going that extra mile. But in those early days, that's when you set the standards. That's kind of when you're saying, this is what I want to be known for. Now, if you've got 10 clients or you're getting 15 or 20 emails a day, you're able to, keep up those standards with, relative ease. But once you get 20 clients, 50 clients, 100 clients, and you start getting 300 emails a day or 400 or 500, it's like, how can you keep that standard going? It's impossible. There's only so many hours in the day. And we don't get into working for yourself to just be a slave for a schedule. Like you say, you want to have time to write and to create because, well, that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
It's so true. And it is really, there's one of my clients who's just a genius about different types of leadership at different stages of an organization's development. And I could know this intellectually. That's the work that I used to do as a consultant to organizations, is realizing the characteristics of the founding entrepreneur, the hustle, the make it happen, the hands-on, kind of leadership behavior that you have in the early stage of a business needs to change. And that's often where organizations struggle as they go through different stages of growth, right? It's not changing the leadership behavior. You need to be hiring more people. You need to be delegating and focused on different activities. And that's something that I've really lived. And so I don't believe in living with regret. I feel great satisfaction at knowing that I was able to build a close relationship with people. But I definitely have learned that in this next stage, I really do want to be taking a different approach and thinking differently about what it means to scale my business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, that kind of leads me on to my next question. What kind of things did you put in place to kind of do it? You've talked about going on a few different avenues and changing course a little bit to what you were, 5 or 6 years ago compared to what you are now. Was there any particular processes? Was it just a change of mindset? How did you approach it all?
It was I think a conscious choice from a business model perspective, but it was also something that I took care of by specific activities that I did. I hired a full-time assistant. I have, folks on retainer that work with me on a consistent basis for doing certain activities. But it's one of the drivers that had me create my new book for Body of Work, is to really set the appropriate pieces in place so that I was able to do the kinds of activities that would be more easily scalable, right? So Escape from Cubicle Nation has been a wonderful and fantastic brand that people really understand, that are in a corporate setting that really want to leave. It's not so fantastic when I'm wanting to talk to companies about their workforce and they're like, why would I bring in the Escape from Cubicle Nation lady, right? Yeah. I've never been anti-corporate. I totally enjoyed the time I had there, but that was something that was inhibiting. And there were a limited number of business models within that particular arena. Often some of my super wonderful, successful peers, Marie Forleo or Ramit Sethi, people who I love and adore, they do the scaling so well. They create amazing courses. They really scale the one to many. But it is based on a huge effort and energy of really collecting a great number of names of individual people to go through that. And just what I knew about myself is really my purpose and my mission is actually in helping to create the conversations between different market segments, right? That kind of business model is not one that matched. So my drivers were saying, okay, this is time. I need to write this book. I need to begin to think about what are tools that I can create that will be scalable, that I could license to a company where they can buy, 2,000 copies of my course for all their employees because it's very relevant, versus having to sell to 2,000 individuals, and that was like that was taking time out, that was thinking strategically, that was thinking about the kinds of things I wanted to do. And then it involved saying no. It involved saying to people I cared about, I don't do coaching anymore. And that was hard after, I mean, I'm a coach by nature, I can't help it. But I really had to say, I need to shut those things off in order to really take the time to prepare myself for these new areas, to focus on my speaking business, to develop new keynotes, new business relationships. And I think, it's like turning a very large ship. When you've been as busy and active as I was, it wasn't like all of a sudden I just shifted gears. It was actually a couple of years process where I was beginning to build behind the scenes the kind of relationships and ideas for body of work so that it wouldn't feel like it was just this huge change. Like, what the heck? Like, why is Pam going from this to this?
Yeah.
I tried to really fill in the gaps so that to take my own medicine and really the whole focus of my book, there was a cohesion and there was a understandable story about how it made sense that after having worked in as a consultant to corporations in lots of early stage entrepreneurship, I would be a great person to be talking about the workforce of the new world of work, right? That I would be able to address issues about leadership in organizations.
Man, it's so important because, like you say, you're always having to adapt throughout a business. You need to be on the ball and think, I'm going to have to make a hard decision here. I like coaching, but there's only so much one-to-one you can do. And as you grow and you ultimately, make more money and you're charging more money for an hour and everything like that, you have to start thinking, how can I get out to a more mass market? And you're not going to be able to do that if you're always having these one-to-one conversations. But in the early days, it's so hard. And I love how you talk about building the behind the scenes in a team. So often we see an individual, you mentioned someone like Marie Forleo, who is such a big brand, and you see her, but behind that one individual, there's probably a couple dozen of people who are always helping out in different areas. And even if you're a kind of solo entrepreneur or a writer, you're still always having to think, how can I build this team around me to make sure I'm effective and productive and really kind of getting the most out of my world?
It's true. And I think it really depends on what is that size business that you want to grow, because there is an easy trap to fall into, which is saying my natural path would be to evolve my business to be, in a similar vein to what Marie's is, or I want to be the next Dan Pink as a writer or whatever it is. Each person, I think, at different stages of life can find that right kind of business model and size. And I've known people who say, I want to go big. I want to have multi hundreds of millions of dollars kinds of business that can really scale, right? That could be sold or acquired or something like that. For me, I'm a mom. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and a huge value in spending time with them. My basic definition of success is to enjoy my life while I'm living it. I do not want to be the kind of person who's constantly harried and stressed and managing, 100 different employees and flying off all the time, to meet with investors. Quality of life, quality of time with my kids is really, really important. So that becomes a design parameter that I put around what my business model is and how I want it to go. And I love to get input from many people about ideas for what they think, what could I do, what should I do. But I think the filter that we all have to put that kind of advice through is, what makes sense for me, right? What are my blind sides that often lead to the kinds of mistakes that you've probably been talking to many people about, right? Yeah. An outdated story about how, I'm doing this in my business because of some strong value, as opposed to saying, I'm kind of scared, right? I know that I need to scale, but I'm a little scared to know if I can do it. Those kinds of insights are things that you need to filter. But I have met massively famous, rich, successful people with great balance sheets who are absolutely miserable. And I've met through my travels people who have nothing on paper, but are absolutely warm, delightful, generous, lovely human beings who have a very high quality of life, and probably everything in between. So we need to find the right business model and structure to be leveraging our strengths at a given period of time, right? Mm-hmm. That's respecting creating that kind of life that we want to live. When my kids are, through high school and in college and off, then that might be a time where I'm like, let me do it. Let me hit something big. Let me go on the road all the time. But I think we have a lot of control over those decisions that we make.
Fantastic. And what I'm hearing here is that your journey, you always had that I want to have quality relationships. I want to be speaking to people. I want to have, this quality. You keep saying the word quality. And that was always there. But I think on this journey, it kind of told you, made you appreciate it even more because you've built an entire business model to, like you say, work to you rather than you trying to work towards a defined out of the box business model that maybe some consultants will say this is what you need to do.
Exactly. I mean, it's an easy trap to fall into. It really is. And we can look at somebody else and it seems like they have it all figured out. And it's actually a very effective way that I often tell clients, you don't need to be creating everything from scratch. You can look at something and especially within business models, that somebody has and really understand, how could I take the good elements of this and maybe tweak it a little bit that makes sense for me. But it's very different than saying, I want to be Dan Pink, I want to be Ramit Sethi or Marie Forleo or whoever it is, the minimalist person who has no possessions and, travels with their kids, whatever that ideal is, that's based on that person expressing their own, if they're happy, if they're fulfilled in what they're doing, they're expressing their purpose and creating their own body of work based on who they are. And I think that's what our job is to define for ourselves. What is that body of work that we really want to create, right? What do we want to bring forward? How do we want to be using our time? And that is one thing I find that's really shifted in a positive way. Choices that I've made is where I see poor choices about business model, limiting beliefs about the way that I work completely crimp my ability to actually be delivering the purpose that I have, which is I want as many people as possible around the world to feel more confident, to feel more capable of taking care of themselves and their family in whatever work mode that they have, right? I want people to have those skills. I want people to not be afraid. I want them to be able to experience the joy of doing work that they love. Like that drives me when I see my clients able to do that. So from that perspective, I can say I'm being really selfish to stay stuck in my limited view of how it is that I want to operate in a business model that doesn't serve me or anybody else.
True, true. And like you say, it's such an easy trap to fall into, especially in the early days, because we have role models, and role models are a fantastic thing, but they're dangerous too, because you can get too warped into it and say, I want to be just like Richard Branson, I want to have what Warren Buffett has. But you're a unique individual, you have to be yourself, and you can't just copy. You need to take, like you say, the good and mold it around your own world. Otherwise you're just
Exactly.
going to go down dangerous paths. So I suppose my question now is, if you could speak to your younger self, someone who's starting up, they've got it small, they've set these values in the beginning and it's manageable now, but they know that if it actually rumbles forward to a point where they're getting hundreds of emails each day and their 10 clients becomes 50, that they wouldn't be able to do that. What would be your advice to kind of get that balance between making sure you have the standards and the values all ticked, but that you're giving yourself room to grow and move down that path that you've got in your mind?
I think it's more about making sure to take time out to address those questions, give energy and attention to it earlier, to be soliciting advice of your High Council of Jedi Knights and people who you admire, to be giving input and be open and willing to be criticized in the best way, right? With somebody who, has your best interest in mind, but can say, why are you doing that? Like I hear you saying this but it feels like maybe there's something underneath that. What's your fear? Here's a different way to do it, because it's so easy just to be in the hustle, to be just chasing it and working with everybody. And you can tell yourself, I don't have any time. Like as soon as I can take a moment, that I'm going to stop and really look look what I'm doing. But I have to make my mortgage and I have to keep going. And one thing can feed on to the next. And the importance of taking time out to stop and say, what am I doing? Should I be doing these activities? How can I get some insight into this? And then if I realize that making a change is going to be a little bit difficult, how can I surround myself with people who will help me make that change? That's the key difference I've seen between so many people who I've worked with who have been successful. And by that, I mean, they've actually met their goals and they've been really satisfied and fulfilled while doing it, are those people that are kind of disciplined about how it is that they have their own planning process, and they are rigorous about making sure that they get insight from people that they respect and admire. And then they make those tough choices. They really do make a change in their behavior. They do make a shift in their business model.
I think that's great advice. Rather than waiting for it to become a problem and reacting, be proactive and start thinking, this is fine right now, but is it going to be fine in 6 months' time when, I'm hitting my goals and I'm projecting and I'm growing all the time? And, just having that proactive insight so you're ready for when, you do become busy. Otherwise, you just wait to become a stressful, crazy mess and you're in a rut, and getting out of a rut's not the easiest thing to do.
It's true, and success can be as challenging as failure is, right? That one can build on the other, and it can always be more, 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 right? You get amazing press, and then they want you on television in your local area, and then they want you in New York all the time, and then I've just seen it happen where people all of a sudden they wake up and they say, "Oh my God, I don't even know who my husband is or my kids, and I'm stressed out and I don't enjoy the things that I'm doing." You need to stop and make sure. And there's nothing wrong with being on all the morning shows in New York or London, wherever you want to be. But if that is actually a well articulated goal that you have, and then you work toward that to where you're actually happy while you're doing it, I think that's a much better kind of kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think about J.K. Rowling and, the fact that she used to write a lot in coffee shops. And now, could you imagine if she just went into a coffee shop and decided to write a book? She wouldn't ever get any writing done. Like, I write in coffee shops. I couldn't imagine being so big that I was forced to write in my room. I don't think I'd get any writing done ever. So it's that fine line where you want to, obviously be successful, not necessarily a superstar, but you don't always have control of that. Once that snowball begins, you're just in it for the ride quite often.
Exactly. And you never know. Like, she could love it. She could actually love
Yeah.
what she has. It's not that there's any ideal. And I find we often idealize both sides of the spectrum. The super rich, successful, as you said, the Richard Bransons or J.K. Rowlings of the world, or the, pure minimalist, kinds of people who just have this simple life where they're living off the grid. I saw a hysterical, what I thought very accurate critique sometimes of that model. And I have many friends who are wonderful minimalists who are, known for kind of having few things. But they said, why is it for like Anglo males, that it's like very glamorous to have no things? Whereas in the world, how many people of color, like you have no things, and it's actually not a really positive thing. There's kind of some
Yeah.
branding and marketing right around choosing to have a simple life when you have many other options, as opposed to many people around the world who live with close to nothing, the majority of the world, and yet
Yeah.
it's not glamorized, the way that we do it. So I think either side is, if you're just looking at it kind of as this carefully crafted, branded vision of what your life is not really accurate. It's like, what actually make you sing? It makes you sing, and I find that there are some people like Susan Cain, who I'm working with. In the Quiet Revolution, I mean, she is an introvert herself. She's not somebody who is, revels in being with tons of people and being on the stage, but she's just the kind of person who's made to have this massive message. And I think, there's kind of a reason why it is that she was wired the way that she was, and a reason why she has the kind of exposure and success that she has. And I love that. And I can totally revel in it. And then I can say what parts of that are interesting for me and what parts of it are really meant to be for her and the kind of footprint she's going to have.
Fantastic. No, I absolutely love it and I agree. And, the common theme for all this is just to, mold things around yourself. There's only one you. So whether it's you as an individual and you are your business, or you're building something with employees and with lots of products, it's still going to be an extension of you. So really kind of embrace. And I'm all for that because I'm all about story and storytelling. And I always tell people the one unique thing you will own is your story. Like, no one will be able to replicate it or copy it, so you might as well embrace it, go full on, and yeah, see where it goes. I think you
Absolutely.
love it. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Pamela. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm sure everyone listening and watching is going to be scratching down plenty of notes. Some people may be in a bit of a rut where they're getting over bare and they just don't know what to take the next one. And other people might be in the beginning of a journey where it's manageable now, but they can see it, they can sympathize and go, wow, I could see myself in 6 months' time being a nervous wreck because I'm trying to maintain these standards, but I've just got people coming at me from all directions. And it's all about finding that balance. I love it.
Exactly.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, another session of the Purple Coffee Podcast at an end. A big thanks to you for being part of this, and a huge thanks to Pamela for being part of both the Successful Mistake and this very podcast. I loved her insight, and it's something that I feel we don't think of in the beginning. I mean, after all, she didn't. We come up with an idea and we're so worried about just gaining enough customers or enough clients to make ends meet that we don't think about whether that idea can scale and touch dozens of people, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. In the beginning, Pamela was all about those one-on-one relationships, and to an extent, when you start out, it should be all about those personal touch points. The key is how you can keep those personal touch points happening at all times, but on a scalable level where it's still working with 1,000 customers, 10,000, and so on. For Pamela, it's taught her to write books, it's taught her to do courses, it's taught her to do group events where she's able to help lots of people in one go and still offer that one-on-one insight. She's still Pamela, she still offers what she can, but she does so that scalable, and that is in a way only she can. For me, this is the key point to success in business. It's taking your idea that works with 5 people and scaling it so it works with 5,000 people. If you can do this, you are on to a winner. So I hope you've taken a great deal of value from Pamela's wise words. I know that I did. It's an interview I absolutely treasure. She's such a wonderful person, and I encourage you wholeheartedly to check out her world. Send her a tweet or a Facebook message and say hello, because she's very approachable and very cool indeed. You'll be able to find Pamela's links on my website. I've dedicated a page to this podcast episode, and you can find all that out at bit.ly/purplecoffee23. Like I say, you can then check out her Twitter, her Facebook, and whatnot. And whilst there, you can also subscribe to this podcast, which I hope you will do, because it would be fantastic to have you part of things both now and going forward. If you like to watch, the Vimeo channel is there for you. If you like to listen, it's the iTunes that you're after. And if you like news before everybody else, you can have this podcast sent to your inbox each week via the email sign-up form. So check all that out, including the Successful Mistake info. I'd love to have you part of that journey too. And that's all that there is to say on the matter. Another week at an end, but lots more amazing interviews to share in the future. So have a great day and evening. Until next time, be awesome.